everyone. I'm Laura Mandel, JArts Executive Director, and today I'm so excited to be here with Now and There curator, Leah Triplett Harrington, and Shape of Play artist, Sari Carel. And while we can't all be together at the site for this conversation as we might have hoped originally, I love that this Zoom actually allows so many more of us to be here and to hear about this beautiful work. At the Jewish Arts Collaborative, we bring people together to explore and celebrate the diverse world of Jewish art, culture, and creative expression. And this is exactly what the Shape of Play is doing. Originally commissioned to explore the stories of freedom that are so central to the Passover story. Of course, in light of the world today, this piece has taken on even more relevance and significance, both in the intention and in the stories behind it, and in just the pure simplicity of the joy of some art outside that we can all go enjoy together. I've spent many hours there already in this past week with my 1.5 and 5-year-old kids, and I can tell you that people of all ages can enjoy this piece on so many levels. And while the three themes of freedom within it are central to Passover, I find myself coming up to the new year, Rosh Hashanah, very grateful that we're able to bring a bit of joy, beauty, and reflection to Boston as we enter into the year 5781. So before I turn this over, I have to gush for a minute about how proud we are to be presenting this project in partnership with a fantastic team of strong women, Sari and the Now and There team. A shout out to the many community partners who've taken part in this process and to the generous donors who believed in the power of this work with us. I am most grateful to all of you who've made this possible. And now I'll turn things over to Leah to give us a bit more context and get into conversation.
Great, thank you so much, Laura. And I think, again, I echo my admiration and thanks to everyone who worked so hard on making this project come to life after so many ups and downs for the last 1.5 years. As Laura mentioned, I'm Leah Triplett Harrington. I'm assistant curator at Now and There, and I've had the pleasure of organizing this project in collaboration with Laura and all of the JArts team for about the last 1.5 years. If you don't know Now and There, we are curators and producers of temporary site-specific public artwork, and the Shape of Play is our 11th project. I thought it would be helpful to share a little bit of background on our process. We start with artists and their vision first. So we don't have a site and then think of an artist that could fit there. We really look for artists who have messages that we really think could fit into a Boston conversation and bring them here. So when JArts first approached Now and There, interested in commissioning a work that considers freedom, we thought immediately of Sari Carel and her work, especially her sound and sculptural based work that really thinks and considers about translation through several languages and mediums. And when Sari and I first discussed this project, she immediately brought up playgrounds and how they might relate to freedom, which might not be an obvious connection, but I was immediately excited about this idea. I think playgrounds are something that no matter where you are in the world or who you are, you can identify with in some way. If you travel, you can see playgrounds in many of our urban settings, and all of them are both similar and different in interesting ways. They all have these kind of irregular forms and different abstract shapes that kind of vary from site to site. And also importantly, neighborhoods really make their playgrounds. The personality of a neighborhood really comes out in a playground, which we learned a lot more about. And also really importantly, people need to feel free to play. We think of play as something as kind of silly or maybe not essential, but it really truly is essential. And I think we've learned that in this pandemic time. Play helps kids grow up and learn how to see the world, to interact with others, and to see themselves in relation to others. So it's something that's really crucial, but again, kind of can be overlooked. So just about this time last year, Sari came up to Boston for a very hot couple days, and we gave her a little crash course in Boston history. And we also visited I actually don't remember how many playgrounds and sites that we visited in the city, but one of our first, actually our last, I think, playgrounds and park that we visited was the Waterfront Park in Boston's North End. And we really quickly saw that this park could potentially have just the right acoustics for this that we knew we wanted to bring into this piece. And we were also excited by the opportunity to bring a work that considers playgrounds and play to the North End, because the North End was the site of one of Boston's earliest playgrounds and sand gardens. The North End is also a very, has been a home to very diverse groups of people throughout Boston's history. And it's also home to a group of people that have really advocated for the neighborhood for many years. But on that note, and speaking of advocacy in Waterfront Park, I do want to acknowledge that it has been the focus of some heated debate in recent years, and especially in the last few months, all surrounding the Christopher Columbus statue there. Earlier this summer, some of you may have seen that the Christopher Columbus statue was vandalized, and the head was actually cut off. The statue's head was cut off and broken into several pieces. The statue has been removed. It's been gone since this happened and is now in storage. The Boston Art Commission actually at their monthly meetings in August and September has discussed the future of this work, and they're going to be taking a vote on the future of the statue at their next meeting in October, which will be the second Tuesday of that month. So I just want to plug that if you're interested in that conversation, please attend the Boston Art Commission meetings, because it's really, really important place to share your opinions on this work. So with that said, the shape of play is not directly in conversation with the Christopher Columbus statue. It does explore ideas around civic spaces and what it means to be in public together. Again, conversations that really took on a renewed sense of urgency with the onset of the pandemic. We had initially planned, I believe, to install this work in May, and that really changed, as soon as the pandemic hit in March. I'm really happy and excited and proud of our teams for being able to evolve and pivot so quickly. The sculptures of this work were all fabricated by our wonderful production management team, Bianca Morrow and her team. And Sari was able to weigh in on paint color, all the gamut of fabrication issues, all via phone and video call, which was very exciting that we could do that, but also very nerve-wracking too. Luckily, we had done all the sound recording in January on a very cold day. So Sari had recorded all of the sounds from the playgrounds before we went into shutdown. So what is the shape of play? And maybe, Dekel, this would be a good opportunity to bring up the images. Because I think we just opened on Friday, so some of you may not have had the pleasure of being able to see it. I really encourage you to see this work as soon as you can in person. It's really something that has to be seen and heard together on site. So there it is. This was on Thursday night. So the work is composed of 6 sculptural elements, which you see here. They're all inspired by the abstract and irregular forms of playgrounds I was talking a little bit about before. There's also a 16-minute soundscape created from recordings at several greater Boston playgrounds. The soundscape is also 6-channel, meaning that you can hear something slightly different at each of the 6 pillars, but when you're in the middle of it, or something in the middle of it, all of the sounds converge and you can really hear everything from where you are in the middle. It's our hope that with this piece, and those who see it and experience it will consider maybe the overlooked sights and sounds of their own neighborhoods and think about how music and beauty kind of is all around them, even in places where they might have not trained their attention before. So with that, let's get into some questions. Oh, great. Yeah, so this is some of the process shots. This was in the shop fabricating the sculptures. And here's group F. And you can see here where we have the sound, the speakers are in these, the tops of the pillars here. But yeah, I'd love to start off with some questions before we take some from our audience. Sari, you have used sound in a number of your works now. but you're a visual artist and before, and you know, not trained as a musician. What, I guess, talk about what first drew you to working with sound in your visual work.
So yeah, I'm, as I would say, a collagist, and I work with sound through starting working with video and moving image. And I was just interested in how these different mediums are in conversation with each other. There is a long conversation between sound and image that started, you know, many, many years ago. And this piece kind of builds on that, I think, in many different ways.
Mm-hmm. And can you talk a little bit about that relationship between sound and the visual from, you know, going back to early modernism?
Sure. So I think there was a great curiosity about how you can think about sound and image and how they relate to each other from Kandinsky's paintings, but also just in general, thinking about our senses and how they affect each other. Mm-hmm. And as someone who was a big fan of this movement and very attuned to that and was very influential for me, I think that was something that I really looked to historically, mm-hmm. Thinking about how shape and form and color also affect other aspects of our experience. And sound tends to be thought of as, I think it's experienced maybe as secondary to visuals because they're so strong. And I wanted to really lift that up and bring that more to the center of how we experience the world around us, and give it more of a lively conversation with the visuals around us, whether it's a work of art or a cityscape, mm-hmm. Or a landscape full of you know, animals and trees and plants that make sound in the wind. So those lively relationships, that ongoing open-ended conversation is something that I wanted to highlight, and it is at the center of this piece and a lot of the different other pieces that I work with sound, and just kind of taking a moment to train your attention on sound, switch from just merely hearing and moving to listening, and the incredible richness that gets that reveals itself to us once we take that, you know, do that little shift in our mind and allow ourselves to really just pause for a second and listen wherever we are. If we're in the backyard, even at home, in a playground, walking down the street, soundscapes are constantly changing, and there's a great richness there to be discovered.
Absolutely. And I think that's another really beautiful thing about this piece is that both elements really activate each other. You can see this without the sound on, but when you have the sound on, all of the colors and the shapes that you're using on the painted shapes of the sculpture are really, really activated. And I think when you're there too, you're very attuned to this, to kind of like the similar sounds around you. So you can you're in that park, you can often hear, you know, boats as well as trucks, and of course, you know, people walking by. And I think what this soundscape really does is just kind of, as you're saying, activate your senses to be able to appreciate that in a new way.
And that aspect of chance that comes, you know, the piece in a way is also in conversation with its environment, and that aspect of chance is one that I welcome and embrace. I love that there's a porousness to the work, that it's not in a white insulated cube, and it's constantly changed and is affected by its environment, and it's affected by its visitors. And that's just adding another layer of conversation that I have very little control over. And I enjoy that ceding of control.
Cool. So maybe that's a good way to talk about how play relates to abstraction. Why was it so important for you to use, you know, abstract shapes for the design, and both, again, like the color of the piece? And maybe also, if you want to talk a little bit about the sand and how that fits into the work as well.
Sand. So play and abstraction. I mean, there's many things that I can say about that. I'll just say a couple. Mm-hmm. If we think about, you know, the great traditions of art and design and architecture from the 20th century, basically, so much of that is really based on distilling our thoughts and our visions into these abstract this abstract language and something much more distilled and simplified. And that's a really important aspect of so much visual culture and design culture that just happened all around us for more than a century. That's been incredibly influential, again, on everything from masterpieces in museums to how our cities look around us, to how even knockoff bags on Canal Street look. It's incredibly, it permeates really everything in our visual culture, and to that extent how it also affects other things. But a much less known history is how the language of abstraction was really at the essence, even earlier that in thinking and theory about children's child education and educating children through play. And educating children through play is you cannot separate it from the language of abstraction. And thinking about Fourier's gift, just to give an example, and this whole idea of kindergarten and how we can encourage our children to grow into their world through play and learning through play, and also through art, again, kind of intrinsically connected to each other. That I didn't learn in in art history classes. That I had a hunch from sitting in playgrounds and from being becoming a mother myself and starting to noticing these things. And as I was researching for this piece, I dug a little deeper and I saw that there is this this really important history, the history of basically kindergarten, and how, again, it was incredibly influential on so many things that came after in art and design. And that's not really part of the official narrative. And I think in big part, it's not part of the official narrative because it's in the realm that belongs to children and to the women caregivers primarily that take care of them. And I thought, aside from the fact that it's untrue and inaccurate, it's also a shame because we are missing out on this really serious wonder that's been relegated to, quote unquote, the realm of child's play that is really right there all around us. And it's, again, very, very rich and full of interesting experiences and information and layering and conversation. And that kind of, blew my mind a little bit when I actually looked at the historical aspect of it. In terms of the sand, was just a kind of a staple of playgrounds, and it is a material that is very tactile. And we just for folks who don't know, it's used in the soundtrack as a material to generate sound, to play with and generate sound. But it also appears as a visual material and a tactile material in the piece, again, kind of connecting through tactility on these two different registers. And I think, sand, just, it's the most plain, simple material, but we managed to generate such interesting sounds with it. And it has the visual aspect of it that immediately connects you to your fingers, and just sifting with your fingers through sound, something that is practically as much as something can be a universal experience. I think that will be one of those. And so it was, I wanted to throw that in there. Just to go back for a second to another art historical anecdote is, again, in terms of like the official narrative versus the much less revealed one or known one, is that Walter Gropius brought a kindergarten teacher to the Bauhaus School. So the Bauhaus School, which is the origin of so many of these modern art masterpieces that we know and love, and again, are just kind of in all our collective, I think, memory of so much of the 20th century. kindergarten teacher was brought there to help students learn and understand abstract language. And so that conversation, that back and forth, has been around since the beginning, and it still continues because playgrounds are around us, and these objects that seem so ordinary and everyday and non-artistic, and that conversation continues, I think, all around us through art and life together.
Absolutely, that's super interesting. I didn't realize that about Gropius, and we have the Gropius here, a house outside of Boston, which is really cool to check out. The sand, though, it's a really interesting and I think potentially overlooked aspect, is that it brings in another senses. We have sight, we have sound, and then we also have touch, because people are welcome to play with the sand that is at the base of all of the sculptures. And I specifically wanted to talk about that a little bit because something that was really interesting for me to discover in the research for this piece is that the original playgrounds were called sand gardens. And they really were, sand boxes as we know them, with, again, very abstract, angular structures where kids could come and just, play with each other in the sand. And again, one of these early sand gardens was in the North End. It's really a great connection. But speaking of the sand too, and the sand, I know, as you mentioned, was very much part of the recording process. Will you tell us a little bit about what the recording process was like? What did it feel like to be recording in playgrounds? Anything that you hadn't considered that you discovered that day? And then maybe a follow-up question would be, do you have a favorite playground that you recorded in?
Sure. I love process, and I love talking about process. I think so much about art is really playing with materials and seeing what you can get out of them. I approach sound very much as a material, and so trying to see how you can manipulate this material and play with it and just see what comes out in this very open-ended way is something that was really what we planned from the beginning. So the unexpectedness of what was going to happen was designed into the process. And we chose our playgrounds for recordings, and it's, I'm not the playground recording artist, so it's not like I have a long history of doing this. This is something new that I've done for the project, and the experimental aspect was really important. That element of surprise that comes with experimenting. And we just walked in and just started to see what these different structures and materials. So it's a combination of both the different materials, but also how are they built, how are they structured, and then that really affects their resonance and their pitch. And this basically is what we did. Is just we walked around and saw what kind of sounds we could get and recorded them with a pretty basic kind of light to carry recording setup, and really learned as we went. So we learned that the incredible things that I thought would happen, but then completely exceeded my expectations, was the incredible resonance and musicality of metal structures, and how they just really kind of sing as you walk on them or knock on them or play on them with sticks. And then plastic obviously had a very different sound, much more opaque and short than the sand on slides and rocks and twigs, and using our feet and our hands and open hands and fists, and just really collecting this very varied library of sounds, and carrying it with me back to the studio so I can start listening to all that and collage that into a soundscape, and see what soundscape emerges from these recordings. So it's not like I had this idea for a particular composition and I was seeking the sounds. The composition is completely from the materials, from the materials, these ordinary materials and playgrounds all around us. And I just, as I brought them back to the studio, slowly a soundscape emerges.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And you were doing this, again, while the pandemic was really just starting. Yeah, did you have a favorite playground that you recorded in? Or a favorite playground in Boston in general?
They were very different. I might say, I'm, thinking about it, I have a really good memory of the Mattapan playground, which, was, not that big and pretty simple in its structures, like really kind of a neighborhood playground. And we got some fantastic sounds from there, just from, playing lower parts and upper parts. And a lot of the recordings from that playground made it to the final soundtrack.
Cool. Yeah, I think that's one of the most exciting parts of this project for me has been, again, I'm not a parent, so I really wasn't thinking a lot about playgrounds in general in my life before this project. And now I can't pass a playground without thinking about what would that sound like? What would it be like to record there? And I really have a new appreciation for all of the breadth of different styles of playgrounds, in Boston and just in general. There's so many different types of playgrounds out in this world. So I think maybe we're ready to have some audience Q&A if Laura wants to come back. There she is.
There I am. All right. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. All right. So, sorry, this has been so wonderful, Leah. Thank you. We have some questions from the audience and some jive with things that I've been curious to ask. So my first thought is, Sari, I love how this is so personal to you. And I know for both of us with 5-year-olds at home, there really is this very personal connection. But I also have to believe that a good piece of this project comes from your own childhood and, experience growing up. Can you tell us a little bit about, how you grew up and how that might have inspired you?
That's a surprising and interesting question. I grew up in Israel, and I would say, playing in playgrounds, in the 80s. And one of the things that I think Israel is interesting in terms of visuals and many other places that are, influenced by the aesthetics that came from Europe and then also America, is how these kinds of aesthetic and languages tumble through the world and start changing and mutating. And that's one of this kind of environment around me in terms of the visual environment and the aesthetic that it presented to me as a child is definitely one of the just formative things for me as an artist, is kind of this mutated modernism, this local modernism. But when I played in playgrounds, there were all these precarious, dangerous, swing, dangerous seesaws and all kinds of, life-threatening, spinny things. So those are not there. Those are not anymore anywhere. I have to say that really I kind of realized that playgrounds are these incredibly interesting and big public spaces, civic spaces that tend to be really ignored or almost invisible because they're all around us, but again, also because they belong to the realm of children and their caregivers. So I think in a large extent, unless you're a total design nerd, you just kind of tune them out. And as as an artist who's been an artist for a long time before I became also a mother, I saw that kind of that binary relationship, or that that either or relationship, that art is very important and serious and has a lot of depth, and the world of of children seems to be more trivial and ordinary and not worth looking at closely. And I think one of the reasons for this piece is to show that that is simply not true. Is that there is a lot of fascinating, interesting stuff happening in the world of children that is relevant to all of us, even though we're not children or we're not parents. So something that is relevant to everyone, even though you're not, a parent yourself. Play is something that we continue to do well into adulthood, and not just us, also many other animals as well. And so it just shows how much it goes to the essence of living and living well. That needing to play and needing to play in an open-ended way. And this also connects to a lot of thoughts that I have, as an artist, a practitioner, a person that makes things, is that, what is art if not playing 1,000 different ways, finding 1,000 different ways to play? And whatever you're playing with, changes a lot. But that open-ended play is really, I don't think there can be art without it. And so reconciling those two narratives, and showing that they are not one or the other, one is important and the other is not, was kind of a personal, something personal that I felt was really important for me to do, and to show this, it does have the heft that also more official narratives like our art historical narratives have.
Beautiful. That's really beautiful. And I think that too often in this world as adults, we forget that play is important. So I think it's just so beautiful. And I love that everyone can come to this piece and enjoy it and get something different out of it. I think you've really done an incredible job with that.
Thank you.
We have a couple questions about the actual installation. The first easy one is everyone out there. It will be up through October 31st, so you can get out there to play. There's a couple questions about, can you tell us a little bit more about the shapes of the structures, or sort of how you imagined what this piece would look like in addition to what it would sound like?
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of, if we could get into the nitty-gritty of the process, it's a conversation. So I had a design that I had in mind. I wanted to make something that is not a playground. So I'm not a playground designer. I was really interested in having, a conversation with playgrounds, and definitely using it thinking about it as a source and something that is being looked at, but that this is not a playground itself. And so I stuck to really simple shapes, and really a lot of it is about the relationship between the shapes, and where that leads to kind of the dynamic playfulness of it. Also, where you enter the piece really changes how you experience it, both visually and also sound-wise. As you walk around, you're going to hear the sound differently. You have a different experience of the soundscape because you yourself are an active part of it. However you're moving through it, you're passing through it and moving through it really changes your experience of it. I started with back to that with the forms, and then some basic design or composition of shapes and colors on them. But then that continued changing as the sound piece, the sound element of the piece grew and developed. And so I always had to, work on one and then have it get in touch with the other and see how they work together, because they are building this environment. The shapes, the colors and the forms. I try to stick to something, pretty simple, to really highlight the beauty of and the simplicity of these forms, and the beauty of the material. So the raw plywood, the sand, the way the paint sits on the plywood, and the grain shows through. So how these very ordinary materials that are nothing fancy, but actually, are really, really beautiful to look at, and really kind of, you can also touch them. So beautiful to touch them as well. And while keeping, these basic forms simple, I also, with each pillar or element in those, those 6, stations of sculptures, there's also irregularity in each one. So if you look around, there are some, little surprises of shapes that are particular to that pillar, to that little cluster of forms. And so you have that overall composition, but then these little surprises or irregularities that just appear, that kind of show themselves to you if you just take a slower and a slower look. And so I wanted to have that overall composition, but also have specificity and a bit of difference and irregularity in there.
There are so many layers to your work. I think I could keep on this topic for another hour, but I'm going to shift slightly. And I will also just say that I think the siting of this piece is so important, because I think we all knew before it was installed that it was built specifically to the place. Leah mentioned the sound, but also I just think the fact that it's right next to another playground, the fact that it's right next to the water, and you see Boston in the background. It's just kind of amazing how you brought all of these themes and the visual piece of it all together to connect so beautifully with the city. So I just have to say kudos to you.
Thank you.
So tell me this. I know going from a concept, seeing this on a piece of paper to going to real life, it's pretty magnificent. What did you feel when you first walked up to the piece, or when you first saw people engaging with it?
I mean, I have to say that, it's always a very moving experience to bring, especially, a big project that is outdoors, that involves, an incredible production team. It's always a very moving experience, but the pandemic just made it, insanely more of an extreme experience. When we finished installing this piece, it almost seemed, slightly unreal. We all did this together, and really I have, to give, a big round of my personal applause to JArts for being such, goodwill partners, and just so agile, and to Now and There, just, really staying on course and, improvising, and BRM, the production team, just doing incredible work remotely. I really felt like I was, felt like this could happen. And I don't know that is the case, that would be necessarily the case if something about this was different. It was really an incredible effort, not just mine, and at all. And it would have, it all happened because we all managed to work together with all the difficulties and the uncertainty and the remoteness of it all. And so standing there and talking to people at the end, and we have sculptures we can hold and hug and listen to, was like and it's the end of the year 2020, but it's it's kind of like the end of the year for me. It kind of made it make sense in some way.
Love it. So someone touched on this, and you touched on this the other day. I know there's so many themes to this piece, but you said, one of the things that's really important to me is feminism within this piece. Can you talk a little bit about that?
For sure. I feel like I talked about it a little bit. There's a double register to this, which I mentioned a little earlier. One is, these large narratives, these canonical narratives of what is the history of our visual culture. Of course, there's a lot of importance placed onto that culture, onto that narrative. It helps us organize our thoughts. It helps us place ourselves. It is very exclusive. It excludes a lot. It diminishes a lot for the sake of its perpetuating its clarity. And so, you know, I as an artist, you know, these are the works and the stories that I love and adore, but I have to accept them with their flaws, and there are flaws. And one of them is, as I mentioned, is that this whole aspect of how thinking about child development, and again, you know, it seems so niche, but really, you know, children are humans, and the way they think and explore the world is not unrelated to the way a lot of us do. It's not like we stop, but that is a fallacy that you know, that we're led to believe, is that we stop and we turn into like a different person, and we're missing out because of that. And again, it's not like I want to go like, you know, we should all be children again and some sort of romantic idea of it's not that at all. It's just that there is a lot of intelligence and a lot of interesting ideas and notions about how, you know, we experience our world day to day and how we relate to each other, and learn to relate to each other through play, and learn to build community through play. That's like really, you know, play's really serious stuff. So, and you know, historically, it was very important. It's just that it's not in the big books. It's just in a couple of, you know, smaller books. But it's, you know, I'm hoping that, you know, that is changing now. You know, that's like the, you know, the big narrative, and the smaller narrative is you know, just me sitting, you know, hours and hours and hours in playgrounds, you know, minding my children, taking care of my children, and realizing that this is, you know, a environment, a public space full of aesthetic possibility, full of aesthetic surprises. And the more I'm sitting there, I'm just realizing, like, you know, someone should do something with this. And, you know, that's my very personal entry point to this, from being, you know, an artist and a mother, not in my studio. You know, I can't be in my studio as much as I would like, but still making work, and you know, making work and finding materials and inspirations and themes, you know, in places that are not necessarily the places of art.
I love it. And such is the power of public art, and especially this piece. So thank you, Sari. This has been a wonderful 45 minutes. I have promised you all 45 minutes, so I'm going to wrap this up, but I want to remind everyone the piece will be installed through October 31st. So please make your way down there safely, of course, masked and distanced. But the beauty of this piece is that it's actually the perfect thing to do distanced. And I can tell you, I spent the weekend there walking around, and it was just beautiful. So I encourage everybody to do so. It's also important to note, as you've heard throughout this conversation, that there are many different themes and contexts to this piece. And so in this, we're doing a series of conversations. This is the first. The hope and idea being that we'll kind of explore the many different facets of this piece. So next up, on October 20th, we'll be having a conversation facilitated by journalist Renee Loth, in conversation with Boston's Chief of Arts and Culture, Cara Elliott Ortega, activist and founder of the cross-cultural collaborative Tiffany Kogo, landscape architect Sarah Brunel, and Design Museum Boston Executive Director Sam Aquilano, as they explore the civic perspective of the built environment and how this all fits in. And on October 25th, we're actually going to make a little bit of art and music ourselves, pieces that are so central to this project, with artist Tova Speeder and musical educator Oren Kaunfer. We'll send out more information after this about those, and we hope you'll join us. But Sari, thank you so much, not just for this conversation, but for what you've brought to this city. We are most appreciative.
Thanks very much.
And Leah, I'm so glad. And Leah, thank you for being a wonderful partner. I hope you'll all get out and see the piece.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you all for being here.